Hello guys and welcome back to Car Obsession. This week I've been testing the brand new Seat Leon FR, and bearing in mind that I actually own a Leon, albeit a Mk2 Cupra, many of you wanted to see a comparison video on the channel. In fact, I put it to the vote on Instagram and 100% of you said you wanted to see this video. Now I'll be honest with you, I don't really see the point. Now the reason why I say that is because this is a much newer car, this is an FR and this is standard. This is an old car, it's a Cupra, and this is modified. And in all honesty, if you strip away the badges, to look at the two cars, I don't think you'd even realise these are related or that they come from the same bloodline. The new car, it's sharp, chiselled, it looks like a Chippendales dancer in a suit. Whereas the old car, well, it kind of looks like a fat guy in a Primark suit. That doesn't fit. It's a similar story to the inside. I do hope you can see me. It is a little bit dark in here. Now this has a model code of 1p, and I think that's how much was spent to design this dashboard, because it is quite ugly. I'm sure it didn't look great in 2007, and sadly it hasn't got better with time like a fine wine. However, there's a decent amount of kit in here. I've got a CD player. Oh, how retro. I've got aux connectivity, I've got dual zone climate control, I've also got bi-xenon headlamps. So the interior kit, I've got cruise control as well. That may seem like a very given kind of piece of kit nowadays, but in 2007 not all cars had cruise control. I've also got these fantastic low slung hugging front sports seats, and these really are the highlight of the interior. They are lovely to sit in, and when you're really going through the corners at a fair rate of speed, yes, it's good to have these on board. Rear space isn't as good as the new car, but I'm sure that should come as no surprise, as the overall length of this car is 108mm shorter than the Mk4, and the wheelbase is 53mm shorter as well. That means in the back, for my 6'2" frame, I am a little bit cramped. I wouldn't say I'm overly uncomfortable, but the driver's seat has been set for me and I've got very little knee room left. Legroom isn't too bad, but I don't think I'd want to be in the back of this car for quite a long time, bearing in mind you've got this dark roof lining, the windows aren't overly massive, so it does feel a little bit dingy back here, and you can probably see on camera that it's quite dark in here. Headroom is okay, I've got a few millimetres left, but not much. So when it comes to the old car and new car comparison for space, sorry Leo, you've lost this one. Let's check out the boot. The Mk2 offers 341 litres, which in all honesty isn't too far behind the Mk4, as that offers 380 litres. Yes, it isn't the biggest boot going, but I'm sure you'll agree it's still pretty usable, although there is quite a large load lip into the boot. Step inside the new car, and as you can imagine, there's much more technology in here. And overall, it is a much more pleasing place to be. You've got this large 10-inch touchscreen, you've got a digital cockpit, and in fact, Seat has described the new Leon as the most advanced vehicle it has ever produced. No pressure, you know, you've got a lot to live up for. The seating position is actually quite similar. Would I say the seat feels a little bit lower? Possibly, but only by a few millimetres. The seats are still fantastic, not quite as hugging, but even so, these are still supportive enough when you're having a more spirited drive, shall we say. So overall, if I had to choose between interiors, of course I'd pick this car. It's got more mod cons, it's nicer to be in, it feels, well, just feels much more modern. But come on, this is a brand new car, it ought to feel modern. Right, let's have a look at the rear space. Rear space is another area where the new car wins, because, as I mentioned, this car is longer compared to the Mk2, which means you get more interior space. So knee room is noticeably better, as is leg room. Yes, I don't feel as cramped back here. Of course, I don't have the dark roof lining, so it feels a bit more airy in here. Headroom is also pretty good as well. So the new Leon has got the old Leon licked for rear space. But let's have a look at the boot area. The Mk4 actually has the exact same size boot as the Mk3, which means you get 380 litres. It's not the biggest in class. If you want that, take a look at the Skoda Octavia. That offers 600 litres, but I'm sure you'll agree it is still very usable. Like the Mk2, there is quite a large load lip, so if you want to load bigger, heavier items, you may find that a bit of a faff. Anyway, that's enough about the practicality. I think it's about time we go for a drive. Right, age before beauty. So let's go in at Leo first. Be rude not to, it's my car after all. Right. Let's find some open roads. Well, open-ish. It is a Saturday and it's likely to be busy in this area. But hopefully we can go for a nice little drive. Oh, it's been a few days since I've driven Leo, and I forgot how good he sounds. And the car is warming up, and I am in a residential area, so I'm not going to be driving like an absolute idiot. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is not your standard Leon Cupra. Oh no, this car has been modified, although to look at, it looks relatively standard. You may, if you have a keen eye, you may have spotted the lower ride height. So this car's no longer riding like a crossover, because this is on Abarth Sportline lowering springs. So the front end is lower by 30mm and the rear end is lower by 20mm, if I'm not mistaken. But that's not where the modifications end. You would have already heard the Cobra non-resonated exhaust, which sounds delightful. This is how this car should have sounded from the factory. The standard exhaust is okay. It sounds relatively nice, but it's very reserved, much like the car's exterior styling. Well, the sporty side of the styling. Obviously, the overall styling is quite bold, and that may be a good thing for you. It may be a bad thing. As I've said, I'm not a massive fan of the way how this car looks. As well as the fruity exhaust, I have an engine that has been tinkered with. So this is running a stage 1 AMD tuning map, and yes, it's pretty potent. Now, out of the factory, this car would have produced 240 horsepower along with 300 newton meters of torque. However, this car was actually pushing 264 horsepower from stock. So yeah, already this car was more potent to begin with. However, it's now pushing out 326 horsepower along with, I think it's 456 newton meters of torque. And this power is fed to the front wheels via a 6-speed manual gearbox. Now, you may think that this car is torque steer-tastic and that the front wheels really struggle to put the power down. And if you're a bit clumsy with the throttle, i.e. heavy-footed, or if you're driving the car in the wet, then of course it will scrabble its power away. This hasn't got a limited slip diff, nor does it have the XDS, the electronic diff that the Leon FR has, and also the facelifted version of this car would have had as well. So that's more like torque vectoring as opposed to an actual diff. Oh my god, I promise I'm not doing this for the cameras. After driving the Leon, well, the FR, for almost a week, I've forgotten just how rapid this thing is. This is a weapon. Now, from factory, this would have had a 0 to 62 time of 6.4 seconds, which even by today's standards is pretty respectable. Now, however, I'm not too sure. I really ought to film a 0 to 62 sprint, but I'm not too sure how much the clutch will like it. This car is still on the standard clutch, and I think at points it is starting to slip, but I suppose that shouldn't really be a surprise, bearing in mind, A, it's a standard clutch, and B, I have no idea if and when it has been replaced. This car has done almost 85,000 miles, so I reckon it's probably on the original clutch. Right, bit of open road now. Oh, blimey. Oof. The top speed of this car when it came out of factory was 153 miles per hour. So that's the performance side of things out of the way. And as you can probably tell by my reactions, this car is far from a slouch. Let's talk about the ride. The ride is quite jiggly, although it's worth noting that the ride is actually better now on the lowering springs than it was from stock. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that I did have a broken coil spring, so that could well have contributed to the rather lumpy ride this car used to have. But from what I've read on forums, the iBarks normally give it a better ride than stock anyway. The ride is still firm, it is still quite jiggly of course, but it's more compliant and a bit more forgiving than it used to be. The 6-speed manual gearbox, the change is pretty good, although I would like it to be a little bit shorter, and at some point I will fit a short shifter kit just to make the throws just a little bit more snappy. Oh. But to be honest with you, this 6-speed manual, the changes are pretty good. Now this generation of Leon Cupra, was not made available with the DSG gearbox. I don't think the FR was either, although I may be mistaken, but I know for a fact that in the UK at least, you couldn't have the Leon Cupra with a DSG gearbox. It was 6-speed manual or nothing, and for a die-hard manual fan, that's absolutely fine with me. The brakes in this car are very good. In fact, they're probably a little bit too good. They are a little bit over-assisted, so they do take a little bit of while to get used to. So this has got the same brakes as the S3 and the R32. Oh. Now let's talk about the corner rim. This car corners really well. The grip is fantastic. On the front axle I've got Goodyear Eagle F1 tyres, and on the rear axle I've got Pirelli P0 Neros. By the way guys, don't forget to check out my merch. I am wearing it, but you can't see it because I've got my super dry jacket on, because although it's very sunny, it is actually quite cold today. But yes, if you want to check out my t-shirts, head over to controlandshift.com, and there is a good range waiting for your selection. What corner's flatter, this or the new Leon? It's difficult. As much as I hate to say it, I think the new Leon, I think it corners just a little bit flatter. I think it has a little less body roll in the corners compared to this car, which is kind of shocking because this is on lowering springs, and B, this is a Cupra. So hopefully with the click of a fingers, I'll be transported to the new Leon. So let's give this a go. Let's concentrate really hard, and hopefully that was seamless. It probably wasn't, but anyway, that aside, here we are in the brand new Leon FR, the Mk4, otherwise known as the 5P if we're going to be talking about nerdy model codes. Now this car, as you can probably guess, isn't as potent as my Cupra. Firstly, it's an FR, so although it's meant to be sportier, it's not meant to be quite as sporty as the Cupra. This is kind of semi-skimmed, and the Cupra is full fat if we're going to compare the two cars to milk, which does seem a little bit weird. But anyway, under the bonnet, I have a 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol, which produces a modest 130 horsepower along with 200 newton meters of torque. And to be honest, I thought this car was going to be quite slow and a little bit sluggish, and I would say the 0 to 62 time would back me up on that, because this car will take over 9 seconds, 9.4 seconds to be exact, to hit 62 miles per hour. And I'm sure you'll agree that isn't particularly potent. The top speed, in case you're wondering, is 130 miles per hour. Now, I don't think I mentioned it earlier. I may have done, but my Cupra has got a 2 litre turbocharged petrol engine. But back onto the new Leon, with this being the FR, it is on sports suspension. So at lower speeds, like now, it is a little bit firm, a little bit jiggly, a tad lumpy. I would say compared to the Cupra, it is a bit more comfortable. It feels a bit more compliant, a bit more forgiving. But of course, my other car's a Cupra, and it's on lowering springs. So should that come as a surprise? No, I don't think it should. This car also feeds its power to the front wheels via a 6-speed manual gearbox, and I have to say, this 6-speed manual gearbox does feel better. The changes feel maybe a tad shorter, but they just feel a little bit slicker, a bit more assured, a bit more accurate. Now the power delivery, as you can imagine, it simply can't match the potency of the Cupra, but it still feels relatively nippy. Like I said, I thought this car was going to feel a little bit underpowered with it only offering 130 horsepower, but it's surprisingly nippy and peppy. I think you'd have to be mad to call it fast, but I would definitely say this has enough performance to keep you happy day to day. This car is riding on 17-inch alloys, whereas my Cupra is riding on 18-inch alloys, so this has got the smaller alloys, of course, therefore it rides a little bit better. One thing this car has that my Cupra doesn't is a choice of driving modes. So I have normal, eco, sport, or I think the other one is individual, if I'm not mistaken. Hit the touchscreen there. Driver profiles. No, that's the wrong one. Yes, individual. Now, as much as I like this 10-inch touchscreen, pretty much everything to do with the car is controlled via this very nice piece of tech. And the problem with that is when you're driving, particularly when you're on a little bit on an uneven road and you're kind of struggling to hit the touchscreen with any real accuracy, is it can be fiddly to use on the move. It's a fantastic looking device, don't get me wrong, but is it the most intuitive? I'm afraid not. However, you've got this lovely digital cockpit, which is really pleasing to look at. You can change the views as well, and it really helps to make this car feel cutting edge. So when it says this is the most advanced vehicle it has ever produced, I can see why. I've also got a good amount of safety kit as well, whereas my Cupra doesn't, with it being an old car. Yes, my Cupra's got airbags and traction control, and well, that's pretty much it really. It hasn't really got much else to it. This car's got lane keep assist, it's got autonomous emergency braking, it's got heel hold assist, and of course it's got 6 airbags. So out of the two cars, this is definitely more safe. Right, I will get onto a few twisty bits in a few moments. I can talk about the handling. Away we go. This car sounds alright. The engine note is quite reserved, it's quite modest, but this car isn't really about being shouty. Right, okay, let's open it up a little bit. So this car does feel relatively nippy. I keep using that word. I need to think of a different word for nippy, but it does feel relatively zesty. First word that came to my mind in isolation, but after you've driven it after the Cupra, this car does feel slow. Now I know it's not designed to be out and out fast. It only offers 130 horsepower, of course, but yeah, it feels like I'm mashing the accelerator and it feels like the car's not moving. The weight of the steering is pretty good. It gets heavier when you put it into sport mode, and the throttle response also becomes better when you pop it into sport mode as well. Oh, which car corners flatter? It's really difficult to tell. There really isn't much in it. I thought it might have been the FR, surprisingly. I need to get onto a bit more open road before I can really draw a proper conclusion. But as a kind of quick summary, both cars corner fantastically. This car is wearing Bridgestone Turanza tyres, which I think I had on my Mk2 Mk5 at some point. They are pretty decent tyres. They wouldn't be my choice of tyre, but they do work on this Leon FR pretty well. The brakes aren't quite as sharp as the Cupra, but they still offer a good amount of stopping power, so I've got no complaints there. And although this car simply can't match the performance of the Cupra, even if the Cupra was standard, that would win out, it's still an enjoyable car to thread through the corners and drive in a dynamic fashion. Just a shame I've got a bit of traffic today, but it's a Saturday. There's not much I can really do about that. This car has got loads of kit. I've got front and rear parking sensors, LED headlights, LED rear lights, the digital cockpit. I've got navigation, smartphone connectivity, Bluetooth, DAB radio. What else have I got? I mentioned the front and rear parking sensors. I've got the drive select, so as I mentioned, I've got a choice of 4 different driving modes. I've got ambient lighting, which is quite nice when it gets dark. Cruise control with speed limiter, although my car's got cruise control, so that's one thing it shares in common. So overall, this is a very well kitted out car. Few people have been asking me which car would I rather have, and that is actually a little bit of a tricky one. Of course, my Leon is the Cupra, it's got more power and it is more exciting to drive. However, I quite like my tech. I'm quite big on tech, therefore to have the mod cons I have in this car, it is a very appealing thing to have, although like I said, the touchscreen isn't the most intuitive to use. So it's a really tricky one. Can't I have both cars? What do you mean that's greedy? Okay, fair enough. If I wanted to buy a car for driving enjoyment, I would definitely have the Cupra. But as a device in which to just go about town in, to commute to work and to generally live with, I would argue this is the more appealing choice. It's got more kit, it's much more modern of course, it looks better, it's got more space in the rear, and it has a bigger boot. Oh, and of course it's better on fuel. So on this little drive, I've been getting, well, I'm about to tick over, I just have ticked over to 32 mpg, whereas the Leon, I was doing about 24. Obviously both cars have not been driven in a very economical way, and in regard to overall mpg, this car on a combined run will give you around 50 mpg, and my Cupra, I'm really having to delve into my memory banks here. I want to say, no, I was going to say 39. That seems far too optimistic. I'd say the Cupra's probably low 30s in regard to its mpg, but I will pop a subtitle down below to give you guys the correct information. So there we have it guys, the Mk2 Leon Cupra versus the Mk4 Leon FR. Which one would you have guys? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. What would I have? Of course, it goes without saying, it'd have to be Leo, my Mk2 Cupra. You're a good boy, aren't you? However, having said that, the new FR is a very, very accomplished car, and it's very competent and it has lots to offer. So if I had to live with this car, it wouldn't be a hardship. Thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you have enjoyed it. If so, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. If you are subscribed, don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified every time I make a video. But until the next time guys, be sure to keep up the car obsession.